Hey class, in this video we're going to be talking about Lab 1 Part 1, and we're going to be covering some of the core features of Microsoft Excel, things like formulas, formatting, filters, pivot tables, and charts. Now if you've never used Excel before, don't worry. I don't expect you to have any prior experience or have taken any Microsoft Office classes. I'll walk you through Part 1 of this lab step by step in this video. And even if you're comfortable with Excel, this activity can still be worth your time. You might pick up a tip or two that you haven't seen before, or just get a good refresher on some important features. I can also guarantee you that later in the course, we'll be doing some things with Excel that even experienced users often haven't encountered. Most importantly, if you get stuck, or if something doesn't look quite right, please reach out. That's what I'm here for. My role as your professor and as a tutor at the college is to support you, so don't hesitate to ask for help. Let's get started. Before I get started with the demonstration of Excel for this portion of the lab, I want to mention that if you don't have Excel installed on your computer, you're going to want to check out a couple options. So I'm going to go back to the home page of our Canvas course, and on that home page I've got a button here for course resources. And if you don't have a Windows computer that's capable of running all four of these applications, there are a couple different options for you. One is that you could borrow a Windows laptop from the GRCC library. You can do that for the entire semester at no cost to you. They have Excel and Word pre-installed, and you would still need to install Tableau and Power BI and Orange by yourself. These laptops, though, are limited in quantity, so it's a first come, first serve thing. So if you're interested, you want to check it out right away, and you can click on this link here to learn more about that. Another option is that if you want to use maybe your MacBook or your Chromebook to complete the course, we do have an app called Omnissa Horizon Virtual Desktop. Basically what that app allows you to do is remotely connect to a GRCC computer that has Windows and has all the required software installed. And there may be a slight lag though when you're using that software depending on your internet connection and the speed of your computer. And when you're using that option, you must be careful that you save your files in the right place. So I've provided a video that shows how to access that virtual desktop, and this is the link to access it. And then down below I've got information about the four apps that we use for the course content in the course. And if you click on these arrows next to any of them, you're going to get a little bit more detail. So it's going to tell you the system requirements for that app, and then if it's available to download, there'll be a download link. Now for Excel, Excel's not free. It's the one of the four that isn't free. You need a license to be able to use it. But I gave you those two options where there would be no cost, either using the virtual desktop or borrowing our laptop. But of course, if you already have Excel, you're welcome to use that. Now, all the videos that I'm going to make in the class and all the screenshots in the book are made using a Windows computer. So if you're using Excel on the Mac, things might look a little bit different, and you might have to reconcile the difference. But don't fear, if you have questions, you can always reach out and we can figure things out together. So I'm on the Lab 1 Part 1 instruction page on our Canvas course, and we have 6 labs in the class, and each of the labs is organized in the same way. It's going to have a Part 1 and a Part 2. The labs will be spread out over 2 weeks. Part 1 will be assigned during the first week, and we'll have a deliverable due at the end of that first week, and then Lab Part 2 will be assigned for the second week. The Part 1 of the labs will always include a detailed walkthrough like this one. In this particular lab, at the end, you'll submit an Excel file that shows that you completed all the steps demonstrated in the video. And if you're on this assignment page, you're going to notice that there's a link to download the Excel file. So if you click on this little arrow, that will download it to your computer. And whenever you download an Excel file from the internet, it's likely to open up in the protected view. Make sure to click this enable editing to get started. Once this file is open, you're going to notice that there are several worksheets down here at the bottom, these little tabs. Some of them are blank, some of them have data. We're going to be working through each one of these tabs today. At the top of Excel, we have this this menu, which is referred to as the ribbon. The ribbon is where you'll find all of the main tools within Excel. When you navigate the ribbon, the first thing that you'll do is you'll select one of these tabs. The Home tab, the Insert tab, Page Layout, and so on. Within each tab, there are what are called groups. So that's sort of how we navigate the menus in Excel. Is we first refer to the tab that we're on, and then we refer to these different groups. So if I'm on the Home tab, I can see the groups are clipboard, font, alignment, number, and so on. So, my instructions might say go to the Home tab and then look in the number group. So that would tell you to go here, and then you've got individual buttons that apply to that group. You definitely don't need to memorize all of these groups and these tabs, but just sort of thinking about the what's on each tab might help speed things along and help you navigate a little quicker in the software. And you'll get that as you get more experience with Excel. It's possible that if you load up your Excel that your ribbon might not be displaying. And if that is the case and you want to see it, you can just click on any one of the tabs up top and then the ribbon appears. And then if you'd prefer to keep it up on screen at all times, you can click on this little arrow in the bottom right and you can select Always Show Ribbon. On some computers, what you might see here is a little thumbtack, and you might have to pin the ribbon up top to make it not disappear and collapse automatically. So as I work through these different skills and worksheets in this Excel file here, I'm going to be referring back to those instructions that are on our Canvas course. As I do that, we've got instructions here for each sheet. And this first sheet actually has us typing in quite a bit of data. The first thing it's asking us to do is to rename the worksheet. So I'm just going to copy that name over. And to rename a worksheet, you can double click the name of the worksheet and you can type and rename it. The instructions for this lab and all the labs give us a little context about what we're doing before we go through the tasks on that particular worksheet. And here it says that your supervisor asks you to construct a table in which monthly revenue and gross margin percentages for each month are shown, and we're going to clean it up and make it look nice with some formatting. So to give this table some structure, the first thing we're going to do is going to put some column headings in. And you'll notice when you type in the column headings that one of them, gross margin, doesn't fully display in the space that's allocated to the cell that it's in, B1 here. So if that happens, what you can do is you can click and drag and select all three of these columns, and then you can auto fit the width of the columns just by double clicking on the side of any one of the columns that was selected. So if I'm going to put my cursor right here, I see that that black line with the two arrows pointing left and right. If I double click right there, it auto sizes the columns to fit the contents. And you may have to redo that again as you enter values into different cells. You may have the same problem pop up, and you may have to auto fit again possibly. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be entering row labels, and the row labels are going to be the different months of the year. And if we do that real quick here, I'm just going to enter the month of January, and then if I move my mouse around Excel within the cells, you're going to notice that the cursor changes. And when the cursor changes, that actually indicates that by clicking on the mouse that the mouse is going to behave differently depending on what that icon looks like. So if I put my cursor in the bottom right corner of a cell, that's called the fill handle, and what that is used to do is to fill series, to copy formulas from one location to another. It actually can do different things depending on what is in the cell that you did that on. So in this case, I selected the month of January, and if I click and drag down, you can notice that it's going to fill the cells down below with the sequential months of the year. So the software's smart. It looks at the contents of the cell, and it realized that most likely I was trying to fill in a series of months there. That fill handle is used when we're copying formulas over from one spot to another, also commonly used when we're trying to complete a series, fill a series like that. Now I can see that some of these months are carrying over into the next cell, so I'm going to auto fit column A there to stretch that out a little bit. Next, I'm going to enter in, I'm just going to type in the values that were given in the instructions for the gross margin rate and the revenue for each of these months. So now that I've entered those values, now I'm going to format the amounts per the instructions. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select these gross margin rates. And if I'm in Excel and I move my mouse around the cells, I'm looking at the cursor, and the cursor that I want to see when I'm making selections of cells is this white cross. So if I see the white cross and I click and drag, that's going to allow me to select those cells. Now, sometimes you might have a really long list of cells that you want to select, and you can click and drag and keep scrolling down the page and scrolling down the page, but there's a much faster way to quickly select all the cells within a column like this. And what you could do is you can hit the Control key and hold it, and hold the Shift key on your keyboard and hit the down arrow. Now this works because I'm in the top cell that I want to select, so that's why I'm hitting down, because I want to select all the cells below it. So if I hold Control, hold Shift, and hit the down arrow, that automatically selects all the cells down below. Control Shift up arrow, Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift left arrow, they all work in a similar way. So that might be a little hack that if you've never used it, that keyboard shortcut before, that can save you some time and some stress. I actually am going to put a link to a bunch of different keyboard shortcuts in Excel out on the course resources page for your convenience. So now that I've selected those gross margin rates, now I'm going to format them per the instruction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure I'm on the Home tab on the ribbon. I'm looking for the number group, and I've got different buttons for commonly used formatting. And what I want to do is format those as a percentage. So I'm going to hit this percentage sign. So I can see that they're all displayed as a percentage now. And then the instructions say to show them to one decimal place. So I can increase and decrease decimal places here. So I'm going to do that. So next I'm going to select these amounts for revenue and format them with the comma style. So Home tab, number group, looking for the comma style here. And then the instructions say to decrease the number of decimals shown to just show whole numbers. So I'm going to decrease decimal places there. And when you're in this number group, you're commonly using percentage and comma style and accounting format, but there are other formats that are available through this drop-down menu. And you can get even more detail if you click this this button in the bottom right of the number group. You get a whole bunch of different formats here. I'm going to select these three columns again and do an auto fit again, just because I've added some content. You can see one of the columns decreased in size a little bit to fit the contents. And then the last thing I want to show on this worksheet is I want to actually move the values in the gross margin rate column. So if I move my mouse around, once I select that column of values, if I move my mouse around and I put it on the outside corner of the selection, you can see that the cursor changes to this 4-directional arrow. And what that indicates is if I click and drag my selection here, I can move it. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to move it to the right of the revenue column. And then now I've got this blank column in between, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the column heading up here at top on B. I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete it out of there. So then once again, because I move things around, column C isn't quite wide enough to display that label, so I'm going to auto fit the columns one last time. Alright, and since I've made a bunch of changes to this document, I want to make sure I save as I go, so I'm going to hit this little disk icon up top here to save my file. So the instructions for our second worksheet in this document are telling us that we are reviewing transportation costs, and we're specifically interested in transportation costs in July and August of 2024, and we want to flag high dollar deliveries during that peak shipping season. And we're going to be looking at filtering, sorting, and some conditional formatting in this this worksheet. And I'm going to rename sheet 2 per the instructions. Alright, so it looks like sheet 2 already has data in it. It's a bunch of transactions. And if we look at the column headers, we've got the date, the amount, the expense account involved. We've got the truck number, as well as the truck driver's ID number as well. Now all these columns are displaying pretty well, but if they weren't, it'd be a good idea to select these column headers and then once again double click on the side of any one of the selected columns to auto fit the contents, but they're already fitting pretty well there. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the filters to this table. And to do that, I just have to basically click in any cell within the table, and then if I hit Control A on my keyboard, that's going to select all of the values, including the headers, in this table. And once I've done that, what I can do is go to my Home tab. I'm on the ribbon, and I'm looking for the editing group, and I'm looking for the Sort and Filter button there, and I'm going to select Filter. And once I selected Filter, you can see that it put all these drop-down arrows at the top of each of the columns on the headers there, and those are the filters. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to filter for all the transactions where the amount was greater than $500. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this drop down next to the amount header, and I can see I get different options. And what this is showing down below is all the unique values that are in that data set. So it doesn't usually, it's not usually helpful when the values are quantitative to individually select them, but sometimes when the values are qualitative, we may want to just select the ones that we want to see, and that might be how we filter, just by checking boxes. In this case though, we wanted all the transactions that were greater than $500. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my mouse over number filters, and I'm going to select greater than, and then I am going to type in an amount here, $500, click OK. And you can see that the results that are listed are only showing amounts that are 500 or more. And you can see now that if you look at the row numbers, some of the rows are missing because some of the values aren't being displayed. They're still there, they're just being filtered out. You can always look at these column headers and see if any filters are being applied by looking at this little icon. You can see a little filter there, so that indicates, yep, a filter is being applied. If I mouse over it, it tells me what the filter is doing. So it's only displaying amounts that are greater than $500 right now. So the next thing I want to do is I only want to look at transactions that were during July and August of 2024. So I'm going to go over here to the date filter. I'm going to click on the drop down there, and then I'm going to mouse over date filters, and I'm looking for between two dates. So if it's in July and August of 2024, that would be between July 1 of 2024 and August 31st. So I'm just going to manually type those in. You can also click on these little calendar icons and select the dates that way as well. So now the results are even fewer. So now if we look at screen, we can see, oh yep, the dates being filtered and the amounts being filtered, and we have what we wanted. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort these amounts from largest to smallest. So if I want to do that, I'm going to click on the header for amount, the little drop down arrow, and I see an option to sort here, largest to smallest, and I can see that that is now done. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to format these amounts. So I'm going to select column B, and I am going to apply the comma style formatting. And since I'm looking at individual transactions, I think I will leave the values displayed to the hundreds place, to the nearest cent. Lastly, what I'm going to do now is I am going to use what's called some conditional formatting to visually highlight some values of interest for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these amounts in this amount column here, and now I'm going to go to the Home tab on the ribbon, and I'm looking in the Styles group, and I see conditional formatting. And I am going to select Highlight Cells rule, and I am going to take a look at all of the transactions that are greater than $1,500. So I'm going to select greater than, and then I'm going to type in that threshold that was specified in the instruction. And I'm just going to roll with the default formatting. You can change it from some of these built formatting. You can also do a custom format, but I'm just going to go with the default. And you see, sure enough, all of the values that were greater than $1,500 are now highlighted. And one last thing, I'm going to apply another conditional formatting. I'm going to use what are called data bars. And a data bar is a conditional formatting that displays a colored bar inside of each cell, and it helps you visually represent the cell's value relative to others. It's sort of like a mini bar chart. So if I just select it, and I can go, there's just different options of how it looks. I'm going to roll with the gradient fill in blue, and you can see that the larger values give a larger bar, the smaller values give a smaller bar. So it's just another visual way to display the data within each individual cell. Now we're done with sheet 2, so we want to make sure we save as we go along. So now moving on to our third worksheet, we're analyzing the total cost of purchases including sales tax. Here we're going to get some practice with formulas. We're going to talk about the concepts of relative and absolute cell referencing. We're also going to see a pre-built function in this worksheet as well. So I'm going to start off here by renaming the worksheet. And now when I look at this table that's already constructed, some of the columns aren't displaying. Oftentimes when you see columns that have these pound signs, that just indicates that there isn't enough space within the cell to display the value. So I'm going to select these column headers, and I'm going to double click on the edge of one of them to auto fit the contents, the columnlets to the contents. So the context here might be that we purchased these items on the internet, and the seller that we purchased them from, maybe they didn't collect Michigan sales tax, maybe they weren't located in Michigan, and they didn't do a ton of business with residents of Michigan, so they did not have a legal obligation possibly to collect sales tax, but for whatever reason they didn't collect the sales tax. Well, we as a business, if these are items that we're using in the business, would still be responsible for that, and we would pay what's called the use tax. And it's the same rate as the sales tax. So we've got the quantities purchased on these different transactions, as well as the per unit cost. And the first thing we need to do is calculate these totals. These are pre-tax totals. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to multiply the quantity by the unit cost. So we're going to type in our own formulas to do that. And to do that in Excel, you first click on the cell where you want the result to go. So I'm doing it for this first row, so E2, and you hit the equal sign. That tells Excel that you're going to be using a formula. So I hit the equal sign, and then I can refer to this cell containing the quantity of 5 by its location. So it's in column C and it's row 2. So I could type C2, and you see, yep, it's color coding that reference now. But what's quicker than typing in cell references is just to select the cells. So I'm just going to select that cell, and I'm going to multiply. And to multiply, I use the asterisk and on the keyboard. And then I'm going to multiply that by the per unit cost, which is in this cell D2. So now I have my formula set up, C2 times D2, hit enter, and I can see the calculation was done properly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor in the bottom right corner of that cell that contains that formula result that we just calculated. I get that black cross, and now I'm going to click and drag down to the cells below to fill in the cells below with that formula. Alternatively, sometimes if you got a really long list of cells to fill to, you can put your cursor in the bottom right corner, get that fill handle, and just double click. And it doesn't save us much time here, but sometimes if we got large numbers, that's a little bit quicker. All right, so it looks like it calculated all of those values. And then if I click in any one of these values, and then I click in the formula bar up top here, I like to do that to sort of troubleshoot and just make sure things are working. So I can see that when I filled the formulas down below, that the Excel automatically updated the cell references based on where that new cell was located on the page. And that's what I wanted for this row with the purchase of staples, is I wanted the quantity of staples and the unit cost of staples. So Excel is programmed to do that updating of the formulas when you copy it over to other locations. It updates those formulas based on location automatically. And that's the idea of what's called relative cell referencing. The formulas that are copied are completed relative to where they are located on the page. And a lot of times that's what we want Excel to do, and that's the default behavior. But that isn't what we want to do at all times. And now we're going to see an example in a moment where that isn't what we want to do for all the different cell references. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to calculate these totals, but including the use tags. So to do that, we're going to hit the equal sign on the first cell that we want to do the calculation for. And the math here would take the pre-tax amount and we would multiply, so hitting asterisk, by 1 plus the use tax rate. Now, the addition of 1 plus the use tax rate has to occur before the multiplication, so I have to put the addition in a parenthesis. So I'm going to type that out. So parenthesis 1 plus, and then I'm going to reference the use tax rate because it's in a cell over here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to close the parenthesis. I'm going to hit enter, and I can see that the amount with the tax has been calculated, and it looks like it was calculated correctly. So now I'm going to make a mistake here. I'm just going to fill in the cells below and see what happens. Now, it didn't result in any errors, but if I look closely at the details, all of these other examples besides that first one, the pre-tax amount and the after-tax amount are displaying as the same value, and that doesn't make sense. What happened to the 6% use tax there? So if I click in any one of these cells and then click in the formula bar, that helps me troubleshoot the issues. Can I see, okay, for this particular cell, for row 11, it took the pre-tax amount and it multiplied it by 1 plus K10. Well, K10 is this cell right here, it referenced in red, but it's blank. It's not containing the use tax rate. So what I can see is that the formula was supposed to update the pre-tax amount, which it did. E11 was good, but the reference to the use tax rate, that shouldn't have changed. I did not want that to change based on where we were on the page. So what I have to do to address that, you got to do something special. So I'm going to go back to that first formula that we typed for the first row. I'm going to click in the formula bar, and I'm going to put my cursor so that it's touching anywhere on that cell that contained the reference to the cell that contained the use tax rate. So K1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the F4 key on my keyboard. And what that does is it put dollar signs in front of the letter K, in front of the number 1. And what that does, it makes it an absolute cell reference. So that reference won't change when you put those dollar signs in. And if you don't want to use F4, you can just manually put those dollar signs in. So now I'm going to enter to lock that in, and now I'm going to click and drag from that updated formula to the cells below it, and I can see that they all updated to different amounts. And if I click in any one of them, I can verify that it's working correctly. So I can see, yep, it's taking the pre-tax amount, multiplying by 1 plus, and it's using that consistent tax rate. So whenever we need a cell reference to not change, we need to use what's called absolute cell referencing. We need to put those dollar signs in front of the column letter and the row number. Now there are iterations where we want maybe the row number to remain fixed, but the column can be variable, so that we could remove one of the dollar signs in some situations. That's not as common as just absolute referencing and relative referencing, but if we have a situation where that's called for, where we have maybe just the column needs to remain fixed but the row doesn't, or vice versa, that's called mixed cell referencing. So that sometimes comes up, but it's not nearly as common. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to talk about the round function. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select these cells that contain the total including the use tax, and I'm going to increase the number of decimal places displayed. So what you see here when I expanded the number of decimal places displayed is that the values that were stored in these cells were not rounded to the nearest penny. You see that the decimal place carries out further, and sometimes I don't want that. So just increasing and decreasing the displayed decimal places doesn't actually change the values in the cell. It just changes the way that they show up and look in the cell. And sometimes I do want the values just rounded and stored to a certain number of decimal places. And oftentimes with transactions like this, like if we were doing sales at a cash register, well, all those transactions are actually rounded to to the nearest penny. So if we didn't actually store them in that way, we could have rounding errors that display in our counts of receipts versus cash might be off because of those rounding differences. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click inside of that first cell, and I'm going to click in the formula bar, and I'm going to put my cursor just to the right side of the equal sign, and I'm going to type in a word. I'm going to type in the word round, and as soon as I typed in the word round, I can see that results appear. And these are different functions. Functions are pre-built formulas in Excel that do a particular task, and I'm going to use the one function called round. So I'm going to hit round, and then I'm going to hit a beginning parenthesis, and once I hit that beginning parenthesis, it shows me the syntax. It shows me how does this round function work, what does the round function need to be able to work, and you can see that the round function takes a number, and then we have to specify how many digits do we want it to be rounded to. So the number that we're rounding here, we've already calculated that. We had amounts here. This formula, taking the pre-tax amount, multiply it by 1 plus the tax rate, that gives a number. So the number portion of round is already done. So to get outside of that piece of this function, it's called an argument. A piece of a function is called an argument. To get outside of that, you can see that there's a comma here in the syntax. So I'm going to put my cursor at the end of this. So this is our number. I'm going to hit a comma, and now you can see that the little helper here, the little image that shows how the round function, the bold has changed. The bold was in number, now it's in number of digits, and I want to round to 2 decimal places. So I'm just going to type the number 2, and I'm going to close out the parenthesis and hit enter. And now it doesn't display any differently, but if I expand that out, I can see that it is rounded to 2 places. And then I'm going to fill to the cells below, and then I'm going to expand all these out. And if you remember earlier, we saw decimal places beyond the second place. Now we don't. Still just going to display it at 2 places, but now they're actually stored in that way. All right, that's it for sheet 3. I'm going to save it. So on sheet 4, we have the context of we've made several purchases in July, and we want to automate how expenses are flagged and categorized. In this sheet, we're going to be taking a closer look at some pre-built functions. We just saw one with the round function. Now we're going to be using a couple of new ones. We're also going to be looking at an AI tool that might be helpful for us to use if we get stuck in some of these more complex situations. So I'm going to start off here by renaming the worksheet, and then some of these contents are displaying, so I'm going to select these columns and auto fit the widths of the columns. So we have a bunch of different expense transactions here. We've got the date of the transaction, the vendor or payee, get a description of what the expense was about, as well as the dollar amount. And now we're going to be working with this column labeled managerial review. What we're going to do here is we're going to flag these rows if management needs to review them, and the threshold for review is $1,000. So what we're going to be doing here is using an if function to flag these sales values if they're 1,000 or more. So to do that, we're going to hit the equal sign in the first cell, and we're going to type in the keyword if, and you can see, oh, there's several functions that have if in them. We're just going to use the first one there, and I'm going to hit a beginning parenthesis, and now we can see the arguments for how the function works. Now, in addition to seeing the arguments in this way, if I've got that function set up, I can click on this FX button, and it pulls up this little helpful window, and it shows the arguments again, but then it also defines them in more words down below. So a lot of times these helpful windows are a useful tool to help you understand a function and to use it. So the first part of an if function is what's called the logical test. You can think of the logical test as like a check to see if a particular condition is either true or false. So a logical test will always result in an outcome of either true or false. And in this case, since I'm in row 2 of my table, I want to check the amount that's in the amount cell for row 2. So I'm going to click in my logical test, and I'm going to select that cell. So now I'm saying, hey, check D2, And I have to tell the logical test, what am I checking for? Well, I'm checking to see if the amount is greater than the threshold. So I'm hitting the greater than sign, and the threshold for us is $1,000. Now we can see automatically, without doing that if function, that that amount in that particular cell was not greater than $1,000. It was $237 and some change. So that's what we see here is the result of false. But if we were to type in a different value here, maybe to update our page, and also when we fill this down below, some of these values are greater than 1,000. So even though we know the result of that formula, we still reference that cell and test it against that threshold of $1,000. And now I'm going to click in the box for value if true. So the logical test is our check, and we have to tell the if function what we want it to display if the logical test resulted in a true, and then we also have to tell the if function what to display if the logical test resulted in a false. So right now, if it's true, what I want it to do is I want it to display the word review. So anytime you want to have the if function display a particular word, you have to put that word in quotations. And then if the logical test was false, that it wasn't greater than 1,000, I want the if function to display the word OK. So I put that in quotes as well. And now I click the OK button, and I can see that the logical test resulted in a false. It wasn't greater than 1,000, and it displayed OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag to the cells down below, and I should see that the transactions that were 1,000 or more are flagged for review, and the other ones that were less than or equal to 1,000 were flagged as OK. It looks like our if function is behaving properly. Okay, so our next task is a little bit of a tricky one. So what we're going to do in this type column is we're going to look at the words that are in the description column for each of these transactions, and we're trying to essentially map these words to these three different expenses. So we've got fuel expense, tolls expense, wash expense. Well, if we look at these descriptions for, maybe I'm focusing on fuel, well, diesel, that applies to the fuel expense. Fuel card charge, that applies. So does gasoline. So I really have to look through this list of possible values and think about all the different possibilities that would map to each of those expense accounts. And for fuel, it looks like there's three of them. For tolls, if I look at those carefully, see just two different versions of that, toll singular and toll plural. And if I look at wash, looks like we got the same thing going on with that. We've got wash singular and wash plural. So we're going to set up a series of functions that are nested together to accomplish this. And I'm going to explain it in great detail, and then at the end of that I'm going to show you an AI tool that would be very helpful if we got stuck with this or if we didn't know how to proceed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called the search function. So I'm going to hit equal sign, type in the word search, hit the beginning parenthesis, and then I'm going to hit the FX button up top here by the formula bar to get the helpful window. And I can see that the search function has two required arguments. I can see that these two are required because they're in bold, and then the third one is not required and I won't be using it. So this first one, it says find text. Now below it defines it. Find text is the text that you want to look for. So what we're trying to look for are particular words. We're looking for the word diesel, we're looking for the word fuel, we're looking for the word gasoline, and all three of those keywords would indicate the fuel expense account should be charged. So right now I'm just going to look for one of them. I'm going to look for the word diesel. So when I want to look for a particular word, I have to put that word in quotations. So I'm going to type diesel in quotes, and then now I have to click on the box for within cell. Now within cell it says is the text in which you want to search. So I want to search, since I'm in row 2, I want to search the description box, the description cell for row 2. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to click OK. Now the search function, you can see it resulted in an output of 1. I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. I'm going to do first those, I'm going to just drag these down to the cells below, and expand that so I can see what's going on. So I can see that only one of these cells resulted in a number, and then the others resulted in errors. And I can click inside of these just to make sure that the cell referencing is making sense. Yeah, it's searching for the right spot, searching for the word diesel. So what we see there is if the keyword that we're looking for, in this case diesel is what we look for, if it's found, the search function results in a number. It gives us a number back. And then if it's not found, then we get this value error. So that's how the search function works. It either results in a number, outputs a number, or it outputs an error. Now, what does the number mean? Well, the number actually refers to the spot within the cell in which the keyword was located. So, for example, if I put my cursor back at the beginning of this cell in which diesel was located, and I just type in a couple spaces or something like that, a few spaces there, notice that the result changed. I still got a number because diesel was found, but now I got the number 8. Well, the reason why I got the number 8 is because I entered 7 spaces there, and the word diesel started at the 8th space. So it's counting up the number of characters within the cell and telling you where that string of characters, that substring, was located. So I'm going to move those spaces back out, and now it's resulting in a 1. So the important thing here is just to realize that search outputs a number if the keyword is found, and it outputs this error message if it's not. So search is going to help us get to where we need, but we're definitely not where we need to be, because what we're trying to do is I'm going to try to get to an output of one of these 3 keywords: fuel, toll, tolls, or wash, based on the contents of these cells. So right now we're just seeing a number. That's not doing it, so I have to go a little further. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that cell for that first function that we typed out manually, and I'm going to put my cursor just to the right side of the equal sign, and now I'm going to type another function name, isNumber, and I'm going to put a beginning parenthesis there. So now I'm going to click on the fx, and then I'm going to click on isNumber to show the arguments for isNumber. So what isNumber does, it takes a value, and we've already given it the value. That search function is the output of the search function is a value, so the value's already been taken care of. And what it does, isNumber does, is it checks whether the value that's given to it is a number or not. And isNumber will always result in a true or a false. So I'm going to click OK on that, and I'm going to select that first cell that I just put isNumber inside of, and I'm going to fill to the cells below. And now what I see is that those error messages all resulted in a false once that error message was fed to the isNumber function. The isNumber function said, hey, that error message is not a number. False is the output. But for that first one, since the output of search was a number, it was the number 1, isNumber saw that number 1, said, yeah, that is a number. True. And that's what we see here in our column now. But once again, that's not what we're trying to get towards. We're trying to get towards the actual name of the expense, fuel, tolls, or wash, but we're getting closer. And just to simplify this in my mind, I'm just focusing right now on trying to identify all the keywords for the fuel expense. And right now our function is just searching for the word diesel, and it's not looking for any other words that might indicate fuel expense. And we said there were 3 of them. There was diesel, the word fuel, and the word gasoline. We could use those 3 keywords. So I'm going to update my function now for this first cell to look for those other keywords that would indicate the fuel expense should be charged. So the fuel expense should be charged if it's diesel, or if it's fuel, or if the keyword of gasoline is found. So I'm going to put my cursor to the right side of the equal sign. I'm going to type in the word or, because I'm looking for any one of those conditions. If this is true, or this is true, or this is true, I want to flag it as going to the fuel expense. So I hit or, and then the beginning parenthesis, pull up the fx, and then I'm going to click on the or again inside of the formula bar just to get the helpful window to apply to or. Okay, So OR has these different logical tests. So the logical tests are conditions that we want to check for that could be either true or false. So the first one, we've already have it set up. We're basically telling OR, hey, use the search function, search for the word diesel within cell C2, the description box, and if that's found, it outputs a number. If it doesn't, it outputs an error. Then we pass that number or error to is number, and is number either results in a true or false depending on if search gave it a number or not. So we're going to do basically the same thing 3 different times because we have 3 different keywords to look for. So what I'm going to do here to save myself some time is I'm going to copy that first logical test, which was looking for the keyword diesel. I'm going to paste it inside of logical test 2, and then I'm going to change it. Instead of looking for the word diesel, I'm going to look for the word fuel, and then the third keyword that I'm looking for, I'm going to paste that is number in search combination again, and I'm going to replace diesel with gasoline. And then those are the 3 keywords. If we had a larger set of data, we'd have to be careful and make sure that we got all of them. But in this case, that's all we had. So I'm going to click OK. And that did not change the output of this first cell because diesel was already found by our first check, because our first check was just only looking for the word diesel. But now, if I use the fill handle and copy to the cells below, I should see a couple other trues. Yep, I do. So the word fuel was in this row, and the word gasoline was in this row. So those type cells resulted in true. We're getting closer to where we need to be. Right now, our function is flagging all the transactions that involve fuel as true, and all the others that didn't involve fuel as false. But once again, we're trying to actually output the name of the expense. So what I want to see here in the end, in the column F, are the words fuel, tolls, or wash, the name of our expense accounts. So I got a little work to get there, but we're getting really close. So the OR function will only result in a true or false output. So that's not going to work to be able to display these expense names directly. We're going to have to add something to the function, to the formula again here. So I'm going to put my cursor, actually I'm going to go to the first row. I'm going to put my cursor to the right of the equal sign again. And if you remember earlier, we used an if function, and we checked to see if a condition was true or false. But the if function allowed us to display different values depending on if the condition was true or false. So that makes sense again to use that, because if the condition is true of, hey, it found a keyword for diesel or fuel or gasoline, we want it to display not true, but we want it to display fuel. So the if statement seems like it might work, but the only thing about the if statement is that it's made for checking one condition. There is another function called the ifs function, and that function with the letter S, ifs plural, can check for more than one condition. So I've got ifs into my formula. I hit the beginning parenthesis. I'm going to hit the FX button to pull up that helpful wizard, and then I'm going to click on ifs in the formula bar so that the helpful window displays according to the ifs function. All right, so I can see that ifs is already filled out with the logical test. In the logical test, we have our logic that we've already talked about, where it's searching for the keywords of diesel, gasoline, or fuel, and it's resulting in a true right now. And now what we want it to do is we want it to display something else. We don't want it to display the word true. If the logical test is found to be true, we want it to display the word fuel, because that was the official name of our expense account, fuel expense. So because I want it to display a particular word, I put that word in quotes. So now I'm going to move on to the second logical test, because remember, I'm not just looking for the fuel expenses, I'm also looking for the washes as well as the tolls. So I have to have logical tests that do something similar. Well, each of those other logical tests is going to work in a similar way to the logical test that we set up to search for keywords for fuel. And if we focus just on tolls now, there were 2 different versions of that. Toll singular, toll plural with the S at the end. Well, the plural version has the characters of T-O-L-L in it, So really, I don't really need to look for two different versions because TOLL is in both of them. So really, I just need to look for one of them. But I still need to use this logic of OR is number in search. And I'm just going to copy what I have up top there and paste it down here in this other logical test. But it's a little simpler though, because I don't have to look for as many words. So I'm going to clear some of that out there. Really, I just have to look for one of them, and I'm going to get to the end of that one. So here we go. It's just searching now for the word diesel, but it's not the word diesel I'm trying to flag right now. It's the word toll. So I'm going to replace diesel with the word toll, and I see it's still referencing the same cells. Search is still looking for the keyword. Search is either given a number or not to his number. His number saying, hey, true or false, is it a number or not? It passes that true or false over to OR. The OR actually isn't necessary now because we don't have multiple conditions. So if it wouldn't hurt to leave it in, but I'm going to leave it, take it out, and then I got an extra parenthesis at the end for the OR that I can remove as well. I'm getting an invalid there, so it's probably something with the parentheses, and it is. I can see that there's two beginning parentheses in this cell and only one end. So I'm going to put another end in. Okay, so now I'm getting an output of false. And the reason why is because C2, this cell right here, did not contain the word toll. So that's why it resulted in a false. The first logical test was flagged as true because it did find one of the keywords for fuel. All right, so if it had found that keyword for toll, I would want it to display the actual name of the expense account, which according to this chart of accounts lookup table is the word tolls. So I'm going to put tolls plural in quotes, and I'll move to my third and final logical test. And I'm going to paste the logic from our second logical test into this cell, and I'm just going to modify it. So now what I'm looking for is keywords that indicate the wash expense should be used. So looking at the different versions of wash that are in the description column, looks like there's two of them. Wash singular, wash is plural. Well, even the plural has the characters of W-A-S-H, so really I just have to look for that. And I'm going to replace toll in my logical test with W-A-S-H in quotes. And I can see it's working. It's resulting in a false because cell C2 does not contain the word wash. Click OK. Oh, and I forgot to do something there. Let me go back. Click on my ifs. Oh, I forgot to tell the ifs what to do if that third logical test was found to be true. And there we go. So the value of true. The value of this third logical test, which is looking for the wash is true, the function should output the name of that expense account, which is the word wash. So the value of true should be wash in quotes. And I'm going to click OK. And that cell's output didn't change because the keyword was already found by our logic. But now, if I click and drag down to all these cells below, I can see that they are behaving in the way that I wanted them to. So we've automated the process of identifying these keywords and mapping them to these individual expense accounts. Later in the course, we're going to do a lab on macros where we can write programs that really speed up this process and can do it on a large number of transactions at one time, and maybe even create a file that can be imported into something like QuickBooks as a journal entry. Now you might look at this function when we're all done with it, this formula, and say, oh my goodness, I would never have come to that. And if I look at that, I am sort of overwhelmed by it at first when I look at it as well. It's a lot going on in there. Fortunately, these days we have some really helpful tools if we're in a situation like this in our work or at school that we can rely on and get to the desired solution and also understand it better. And I'm going to be looking at ChatGPT to help me with this. So on the screen right now, I've logged into the free version of ChatGPT. So you can get there just going chatgpt.com. You do not have to pay for anything to be able to use what I'm using right now. ChatGPT is an AI assistant that you can chat with. It's kind of like texting with a really smart robot. There's definitely ethical ways of using this tool in academia and unethical ways, but here what we're going to be doing is showing how to use ChatGPT to help us understand what we're doing here on this worksheet. So what I've done is I've written a question here. I gave a little bit of context, which is going to help in getting better output. ChatGPT can make mistakes, it definitely can, so don't bet the house on anything that it tells you. Verify the information that it outputs, but it's generally pretty helpful, especially when using computer software like Excel. So I gave it a little context. I'm using Excel. In column C, starting in cell C2, I have descriptions of different transactions. I want to look at the keywords in the description and map them to different expense accounts. The words diesel, the word fuel, and the word gasoline need to be mapped to an expense account called fuel. The word toll needs to be mapped to an expense account called tolls, and the word wash needs to be mapped to an expense account called wash. How can I do that? So if we look at the output here, we can see that it actually used a very similar approach to what we did. It used a search function, it used number function, the word or, but it used an if statement, and it looks like it combined multiple if statements. Oftentimes in Excel, there's more than one way to do things, and I use the ifs plural function. They use multiple if functions. I can ask it a question here. I can say, could ifs work too? And it gives us an output. It says yes, ifs could work as well. And basically it gave us the same function that we used. Actually, it had an improvement on it, because if our keyword wouldn't have been found, it would have just resulted in a blank cell, whereas the logic here, if the keyword isn't found, it's actually outputting with the word other. Now, if I wanted to understand how those pieces of that function work together, I could ask follow-up questions like that. And when you ask the follow-up questions, it's often helpful to give it some background about where you're at in your understanding. So here I'm telling it, hey, I'm new to Excel. How do these functions of search, ifs, is number, and or work together? So now it's going through what I just spent 20 minutes on the video going through, is breaking them down by parts, deconstructing it, and showing how the pieces work together. And if you had questions as you read through this output about any one particular spot, you could hone in on that in your follow-up questions. I personally am using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools all the time for my work these days. It speeds up the process so much. It helps you learn things so much more thoroughly. You know, it's like having a personal assistant that you could ask questions to 24/7. You know, never gets sick of you, never gets tired. I highly suggest you use it if you get stuck with anything with software for this class. It's really, really helpful for those situations. And you'll come out of it understanding a lot more about what you are doing. Okay, so the last thing I want to do on this worksheet is I want to display the account numbers for each of these different transactions in this account number column. So I'm going to use a function in this first cell for the transaction in row 2, and I'm going to hit the equal sign, and the function I'm going to use is called the XLOOKUP function. So type that in, beginning parenthesis, hit the FX button to pull up the helpful window. It shows the arguments. You can see that there are 3 required arguments for XLOOKUP, because those are in bold, and 2 that are not. I'm just going to use the required arguments. So the first required argument is lookup value. And if I look down below, it says lookup value is the value to search for. So what I'm doing for row 2 is I'm looking at the expense account name that we indicated here in the type column. So the lookup value would be that cell for row 2, because I'm in row 2. So I'm looking up the expense account name of fuel. Click down here for lookup array. Lookup array is the array or range to search. So I'm saying, hey, where am I looking up these account names to get the account numbers? And I've got this lookup table over here. So I've got all the account names for our expenses here. So the lookup array is the range. It's the array range. So it's a table. So it's these cells that contain all the different account names that are possible here. And then the return array is the array or range to return. Well, what I want to output here are these account numbers. So the return array would be the corresponding account numbers. I'm going to click OK. And it looks like it performed correctly here. I look for the word fuel within this range. It found the word fuel, and since it's in this first row, it knew to grab the account number from the return array that corresponded to that first row, 7010. I'm going to click and drag to the cells below. I'm going to use the fill handle. And when I do that, there's going to be some errors. Okay, so I'll see if this works. Okay, it looks like tolls worked. It found the word tolls and saw the account number, but fuel broke here, got an error. All these other ones resulted in errors. So I'm going to click in one of these cells that contain an error. And then I'm going to click in the formula bar, and it's going to help me see why. Okay, so I can see that the reference to the word wash in row 11, that was done correctly, so the blue reference looks good, but the red reference and the purple reference for the lookup array and the return array, they're referencing these empty cells. So I didn't want that. So I realized, oh, I was supposed to use absolute cell referencing for the references to these arrays, because those array locations aren't changing based on where we are on the page. The lookup value, though, that needed to change. So that needed to be left as a relative cell reference, but I had to do something special with these lookup arrays. So I'm going to go back to my first formula that was behaving correctly. And I can see, oh, yep, these are looking at the correct cells for both the lookup array and the return array. What I had to do is something special on those arrays. So I'm going to put my cursor, and I can see that lookup array, it goes from K3 to K5. So I'm going to put my cursor on the beginning location of that lookup array. And so my cursor is touching one of the cell references there. I'm going to hit the F4 key to put those dollar signs in for that beginning cell reference. And then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to put my cursor next to the ending cell reference, hit the F4 key to put the dollar signs in there, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the return array. I'm going to put those dollar signs in to make the references absolute. So now that I've done that, I can click on that first cell and use the fill handle, and I can fill in all the cells below, and now I'm getting account numbers output. I can click in any one of them, click back in the formula bar, and just verify that my cell references are working correctly. Yes, the formula updated for the row number for the lookup value, but the arrays remained fixed and pointed at those original cells. Because I use those dollar signs, I use the absolute cell referencing. All right, that was a lot on this sheet. That was the toughest one. I'm going to save that, and we can move on. So our fifth worksheet is going to have us looking at charts. We're going to be creating and formatting some different charts. So in Excel, there are many different types of charts. I've given a list here of some common ones and when they are used, so be sure to read through that. We're going to be getting some experience in this lab with the column chart and the pie chart, and then the independent portion of the lab, I think you're going to be doing a scatter plot as well. And it says that if we look at the data in the worksheet, we have monthly sales data by product category. So let's take a look at that. So, okay, so we got sales revenue, it looks like for the first 6 months of the year, and we have the revenue categorized based on which service or product we were providing. So we've got different sources of income here. I'm going to start off by renaming the sheet here. And the first chart I'm going to create is going to be a clustered column chart, and it's going to show the monthly revenue by category, by product category. So I'm going to select these labels for these months as well as these amounts. And now on the ribbon, I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and then I'm looking in the Charts group, and I'm going to use a clustered column chart. Now they do have a recommended chart, and what that does is it looks at the data that you selected with your mouse, and it's probably going to select or it's going to recommend the clustered column chart it does. But I can manually select any type of chart up here, and then you got different versions of column charts, 2D, 3D. I'm just going to roll 2D. So this is actually looking pretty close to where I want it to be already. We see that we have labels for the 6 months on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we've got the dollar amounts, and it looks like it sort of matches up here. It looks like looking at the amounts, software is our largest amount, consulting is our smallest amount. So it looks like the blue is software and the green is consulting, and the red's hardware, but it doesn't say those words. It just says series 1, 2, and 3. So I definitely got to dress that up. We got to add a chart title. It'll probably help to do a little formatting with the axis titles as well. So I'm going to start off here by changing the chart title. Since the chart title is already in there, I can just click on it and I can type whatever I want. I'm going to go with monthly sales by category. I maybe want to add some titles for the two axes. Since those are not being displayed right now, I'm going to hit the plus sign. The plus sign only appears once the chart is selected. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to check the box for axis titles. So now they appear. For the horizontal, I'm going to type in the word month for the title. And for the vertical, I'm going to type sales in US dollars. So I also need this legend here to actually display the proper labels for our 3 different sources of income. So to do that, if I select the chart on the ribbon, I'll get 2 additional tabs that will appear because the chart's selected: chart design and format. So I'm on chart design. I'm going to look at the data group, and I'm going to select data, and get this little window that pops up, and I can see series 1, 2, and 3 here. So I want them to display these names. So I'm going to edit series 1, and then the name is going to be for series 1. That was the largest value, the blue. So that was software. So I'm just going to select the cell that contained the word software. I could also just type the word software there. So now software appears. Do the same thing with series 2. That's our second largest. So that's the hardware. Add that one. Type hardware, just select the cell containing it. And finally, for series 3, it's our third source of income, which is consulting. All right, looking much better. Finally, maybe I want these values to be displayed differently. Maybe I want some dollar signs and some comma separators. So what I can do, there's several ways to do that, but one way to do it is just select the data from which the chart was based, and then I can do my formatting to those cells that contain those values. So I'm going to come up here, put the dollar sign, and then I don't need to display all those digits. So I'm going to reduce decimals to show whole numbers. So now if I look at my chart, I've got the dollar sign and the comma separators in there. It's looking pretty good. And then finally, if I want to dress this up a little bit more, if I click on the chart, go back to my chart design tab, I've got different chart styles that are pre-built that I can use. And you can customize it and make it your own. You don't have to use one of these pre-built ones. You can change the color scheme as well, but I'm just going to choose one of these pre-built ones. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a pie chart. So I'm going to select the total revenue for the first 6 months of the year. So I'm just selecting these total values. And then I'm also going to select the labels for the 3 different sources of income. And because the labels for the totals isn't in an adjacent cell or touching cell, I selected the values. Now I'm going to hold the control key on my keyboard, and I'm going to click and drag to select these labels. And the control key was necessary there to grab both of those selections because they weren't touching, they weren't adjacent to each other. So now that I have the labels and the totals of those incomes for the first 6 months selected, I'm going to go to Insert tab, and I'm going to select a pie chart here. And we can go with different versions. I'm going to go with the 3D in this case. I'm going to click and drag and move that chart. And also, if I grab the bottom right corner, I can click and drag and make this larger or smaller depending on what I wanted. So got a pie chart going. It looks like it's the pieces of the pie are proportional to the share of the revenue from each of the 3 sources. That's when pie charts are typically used, is when you're trying to show how the parts relate to the whole. That's what we're doing here, is looking at of all of our income, what portion of it is from each of these three different sources. We've got a legend down here indicating what the three sources were, but the chart definitely needs some dressing up to be more informative and intuitive. I think the first thing I'll do is change the chart title to something descriptive. Let's go with revenue breakdown by source first half of the year. And then I'd like to see the amounts and maybe the percentage that each income category provides to the business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the chart. I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to check the box for data labels. So now I'm seeing data labels, which are those dollar amounts of income from each of the three sources. I like that, but also I'd like to see the percentage for each category. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on any one of those data labels, and then I'm going to select Format Data Labels. So I get this pane that pops open, and I can see there's some checkboxes selected already, and maybe I want to put the category name inside of the pie chart. Now this legend becomes unnecessary, so I'll probably remove that in a minute. I think I'm liking that a little bit better. It's a little easier to get to the information quickly. But I also wanted to look at the percentages, so now I have those. Maybe one more thing, maybe I want to display that percentage to the 10th of a percent. So I went down here to this number group. For the category, I selected percentage, and for the number of decimal places, I'm going to select 1 there instead of 2. And now I got it displayed how I want. Now I can go back to inside the chart here. I can select that legend. I can just delete it out, hit the delete key on the keyboard, do that, and then maybe one more thing here. Maybe I would like these labels of category, amount, and percentage of total to display a little clearer on the screen. So I selected one of them, and when I did that, all three of them are selected. So now I can go to my Home tab and go to my font group, and I can maybe change the font size a little bit, maybe make it a little larger there, maybe make them bold. I can even change the font color if I felt it might make it a little easier to read, maybe change them to white. If I wanted to, I can go to chart design, and I could do, a different design there as well. So whatever I find to be aesthetically pleasing and easier for my users to read, especially if I'm going to be presenting it in front of a group. All right, that's it for the chart sheet. So I'm going to save the file again and move on to my last two sheets. These are actually going to be handled together. So in our 6th and 7th sheets, we are going to be looking at a bunch of journal entries, and we're going to have Excel automatically create a trial balance from those journal entries. And we're going to be using a tool in Excel called a pivot table. Pivot tables are a really awesome tool that allow you to quickly summarize and analyze data sets. You can group, total, rearrange information in just a few clicks, and basically it helps you spot patterns without having to do a whole bunch of formulas by hand. It just saves a ton of time. I use pivot tables all the time. So to understand what we're trying to do here, we have to recall our Principles of Accounting courses that we've taken here, and what we have here is a list of journal entries. So you can see we have the date, the accounts that were impacted, and whether those accounts were debited and credited, as well as some other information like the journal entry number, initials of the person who entered the journal entry, as well as who approved it. And so what we have here are a list of journal entries. And we think back to our Principles of Accounting, we know that we take journal entries and then we post them to our ledger, which is also referred to as our T account. So we take the information in the journal, we copy it over to each individual ledger. So for instance, we got a posting here which we debited cash. That would get carried over to the cash T account. Here we have another one to cash, it's credited. All those debits and credits to cash get posted to that same T account, and the value of the T account is we can figure out the balance of that account. So we can see all the increases and decreases to cash and calculate its balance. So we do that for all the different accounts that show up in the journal entries. We find the balances of all those T accounts, and then we make a list of those balances, and that is called the trial balance. And the trial balance will list those balances in either the debit column or the credit column, depending on whether the T account had a debit balance or a credit balance. And we know that on that trial balance, if we add up all the balances of the debits and all the credit balances, the two totals need to match. It's a way to verify that the posting was done correctly, that the math in the side of the T accounts was done correctly. It's sort of like an accounting double check tool to check the equality of debits and credits. Now that process of carrying this information over to those T accounts, if we do that in a manual way, that takes a really long time. But we're going to quickly do that with a pivot table. So what I'm going to do here to start is I'm going to click anywhere inside of this table that contains my journal entries. And then I'm going to hit Control A on my keyboard. It's going to select these column headers as well as all the details of the different journal entries. And now I'm going to go to the Insert tab on the ribbon. I'm looking in the Tables group. I'm going to select Pivot Table. And I can see that the table that the pivot table is going to be based upon is going to be based on what's in the sheet right now. And I want to choose where it's going to be going. So I'm going to put it in sheet 7. So I'm going to say existing worksheet. I'm going to click on this box. I'm going to click on sheet 7. And then I'm going to click in cell A1 to have it start right here in the top left-hand corner. And then I'll click OK. So now I've got the makings of my pivot table. Now I also should rename my worksheets per the instructions. So I'm going to label sheet 6 as journal entries, and sheet 7 I'm going to rename as the trial balance. All right, so now I've got that pivot table started in the trial balance sheet, and I need to select that pivot table again, and now I get this pane over here that shows all the pivot table fields that are possible. And I got to sort of think about what a trial balance looks like. So a trial balance usually has different rows for all the different account names. So over here in the pivot table fields, I see account name. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag and drop it in the rows area. And now I see, oh yeah, the makings of a trial balance. I've got all the account names listed out here. So then think about what I have in a trial balance. I've got a column for all the debit balances and another one for all the credit balances. So I'm going to go up here to my pivot table fields, and I'm going to click and drag debit down and drop it in the values area, and then I'm going to do the same thing with credit. And now we have amounts listed next to each account. Now some accounts have only an amount in either the debit column or the credit column, but some of them have amounts in both the debit and the credit column. And you think about what's going on with that, with the first one here, accounts receivable. Well, if I go back and look at my journal entries, we can see, okay, here's account receivable, here it was debited, here's account receivable again, it was debited, here it was credited. So I see account receivable is both debited and credited. And what the tool did, and you can see that with the label that's up here, is it summed all of the debits from the journal entries that hit accounts receivable, and it summed all of the credits from the journal entries that hit accounts receivable. So in my T account, if I had it for my accounts receivable, it'd have a whole bunch of debits, and the total of them, the sum of them would be 46,200, and it would have a whole bunch of credits, and those would add to 24,000. Well, to find the balance of the T account, I need to take the total of the debits and subtract the total of the credits. So I have to do something special inside of my pivot table to be able to calculate the actual balances here. And the balances could end up being on the debit side or the credit side of the T account, depending on which one's larger. So I have to include a little logic that looks at whichever side is larger. So we'll do that now. So if I click inside of my pivot table, I get two tabs that appear when I click inside of a Pivot Table Analyze and Design. I'm going to go to Pivot Table Analyze on the ribbon, and then over here in the Calculations group, I'm going to select the button for Fields, Items, and Sets. I'm going to select Calculated Field. So now I have to name the field. So I'm going to call it debit balances. And then I'm going to type a formula. So the formula is going to start with the equal sign. I'm going to use the word if, and then a parenthesis. I'm going to say if the debit, and I'm just double clicking on the field names down here. If the debit is greater than, so put the greater than sign, greater than the credit, double clicked on that, comma, I want the formula to take the total of those debits, I double clicked, and subtract the total of the credits. Otherwise, if that's not true, if debits weren't greater than credits, I'll just have it display with a 0. And then I'm going to close out my parenthesis, I'm going to hit add. Now I'm going to create another function. I'm going to clear the logic out here, and I'm going to call this calculated field credit balances. So once again, I'm going to hit a formula equals sign if parenthesis. Now I'm going to do the opposite. So if the credit is greater than the debit, comma, I want to take the credit total and subtract the debit total. Otherwise, do another comma, I'll display 0, close the parenthesis, add, click OK. So now I can verify if this is working. So for accounts receivable, the sum of the debits to the T account were $46,200, the sum of the credits $24,000. $46,200 is greater than $24,000, so the debits exceeded the credits. The account should have a debit balance, and the difference between these two amounts is $22,200. So it's showing there in the debit column, and then it's showing a 0 in the credit column. So it looks like it did the math correctly. So now I no longer need these two columns because those wouldn't be really inside of trial balance. Trial balance just lists the net balance, either the debit balance or the credit balance for each account, so I can remove those. So to remove them, you can delete them, or you can go over here to these check boxes and just uncheck debit and credit to get rid of those. And then up top here, I can change the label here just by typing in. So I relabeled those as debits and credits. Maybe I want to center that. Let's go to the Home tab, Alignment Group, Center. And then down here, I've got grand totals shown, and it's showing as 0. And it's sort of complex to explain why it's doing that, but that obviously isn't the sum of these amounts, and that isn't what would usually be displayed on a trial balance. So I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is click inside of my pivot table, go up top here to my pivot table design tab. I'm going to go to grand totals in the layout group here, and I'm going to set the grand totals to off for rows and columns. So I got rid of that grand total row. I'm going to type in the word totals down here in A26. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sum function. So I'm clicking in the cell that would contain the total of all these debit balances. And then I'm in my Home tab on the ribbon. I'm going to hit the auto sum. The software automatically recognized that I wanted to sum the values above. So I did that. And then I'm going to do the same thing for all these credit balances. And I can see the totals match up. Lastly, I don't like that the comma separators aren't here. So I'm going to select all of these values. And in the Home tab in the number group, I'm going to select the comma format, and then I'm going to decrease decimals to whole numbers here. And there we have it, a trial balance. I'm going to save this file, and now I would be ready to submit. So what you're going to submit for Lab 1 Part 1 is going to be your Excel file that you created as you watched this video. Yours should be matching up with mine. I will go through it and I will look at what you did, and I will be able to see by clicking around if you use the functions that I used. I'll be checking the formatting. Basically want it to match the instructions exactly to show that you practiced what you saw in the video. Next week, and actually you get started early on it if you'd like, you're going to be working on an independent portion of Lab 1, and you're going to reinforce the skills that we saw here by applying it to a different set of instructions and different data sets. And you'll get practice with formulas, with formatting, with filters, with pivot tables and charts and so on. I know this is a lot, but I know you can do it. If you need help, do not hesitate to reach out. It's my job to help you. Let me know how you're doing.